The grumpy human. Captain Grant Wilder was known across the galaxy as a man who preferred machines over people. Living alone on a worn-out space station orbiting a barren planet, he had no visitors and liked it that way. His station was cluttered with old Earth memorabilia, rusty tools, books with torn pages, and a coffee machine that hadn't worked in years. Better broken things than people, he muttered every time he looked at it. Grant wasn't always this way. Years ago, he had a family, but the brutal war with alien factions took everything from him. Now he was a grumpy, middle-aged man who avoided drama. His only companions were the hum of the station and the distant glow of the planet below. But life has a way of interrupting even the quietest corners of the galaxy. One quiet evening, as Grant sipped his last bottle of Earth whiskey, an alert blared through the station. The emergency signal was loud and shrill, making him wince. He shuffled to the console, muttering under his breath about idiots who couldn't stay out of trouble. The signal showed a small alien craft crash landing just a few kilometers away from the station. Grant stared at the screen, debating whether to ignore it. Not my problem, he told himself, but the signal kept blinking, almost as if it were daring him to act. Finally, with a deep sigh, he grabbed his old plasma pistol and a tattered jacket. This better not ruin my night. The crash site was a mess. Smoke billowed from the broken ship, its metallic frame bent and sparking. As Grant approached cautiously, the sight of movement caught his eye. Two small figures, barely half his height, huddled near the wreckage. They were Calathans, an alien species known for their shimmering skin and wide, glowing eyes. These two looked no older than children, their faces smeared with soot and fear. The older one, with a defiant look in her golden eyes, stood protectively in front of the smaller one. She held a sharp piece of metal, shaking but ready to defend. Grant raised his hands, his gruff voice softening slightly. "Easy there, kid. I'm not here to hurt you." The younger one peeked out from behind her sister, her eyes filled with tears. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Just a grumpy old man," Grant replied, lowering his pistol. "You two shouldn't be out here. This place isn't safe." The older girl didn't lower her makeshift weapon. "Why do you care? You're human. Humans don't help Calathans." Grant scratched his beard, annoyed but not surprised by her distrust. "Well, maybe I'm just an exception. Or maybe I don't like seeing kids get fried in the middle of nowhere." The younger one whimpered, clutching her sister's arm. The older girl hesitated, then finally dropped the piece of metal. "Our ship crashed. We don't have anywhere to go." Grant sighed heavily, looking at the wreckage. He could see why the ship had failed: shoddy repairs and low-quality parts. Typical of desperate refugees. He glanced back at the girls, his heart warring with his instincts. He didn't want responsibility, but leaving them here would be cruel. "Fine," he grumbled. "You can come to my station, but don't touch anything, and don't cause trouble." The younger girl's face lit up with hope, but the older one remained cautious. "Why are you helping us?" she asked, her tone suspicious. Grant shrugged. "Call it a bad habit." He motioned for them to follow, muttering under his breath, "Guess I've gone soft." Back at the station, the girls stared in awe at the cluttered interior. The younger one, wide-eyed, pointed to a faded Earth flag hanging on the wall. "What's that?" "Old history," Grant replied curtly. "Now sit down. You're lucky I have some extra food." The older girl, still wary, helped her sister sit on a worn couch. As Grant handed them protein rations, he noticed their thin frames and tired eyes. These weren't just lost travelers. They were survivors. He didn't ask questions, though. Talking about feelings wasn't his thing. As the girls ate, Grant fixed his coffee machine, or at least tried to. The younger one approached him cautiously. "What's that?" "Coffee machine," he grunted. "Not that it works." The girl tilted her head. "Can I help?" Grant raised an eyebrow. "You? What do you know about coffee machines?" She smiled shyly, her fingers glowing faintly as she touched the machine. It hummed for a moment, then sparked. Grant yanked his hand back, glaring. "Careful, kid. You'll blow us all up." "Sorry," she squeaked, retreating to her sister. Grant sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Just don't touch anything else." The station fell quiet as the girls dozed off on the couch. Grant watched them for a moment, his gruff exterior softening. They were just kids, scared and alone. For the first time in years, he felt a faint pang of purpose. But his moment of peace was interrupted by the station's alarm. A new signal flashed on the console. It was a warning. An unidentified ship was approaching. Grant's stomach sank as he realized what it meant. "Looks like your trouble just followed us," he muttered, grabbing his pistol. The quiet life he loved so much was officially over. Alien girls and a human home. The inside of Captain Grant Wilder's station was nothing like the sleek, high-tech homes the Calathon sisters had imagined humans lived in. Instead, it felt messy. Tools were scattered across metal counters, half-eaten ration packs sat next to open circuits, and strange objects covered the walls. Photos, rusted weapons, and old Earth flags. Lara, the older of the two alien girls, stood protectively behind her younger sister, Xena, as they stepped inside. Her golden eyes darted around the room, analyzing every corner like she was expecting a trap. Xena, however, was less concerned. Her wide, curious eyes sparkled as she examined everything, from the broken coffee machine to the humming lights that flickered above. "This place is weird," Xena whispered, tugging on Lyra's sleeve. "Yeah," Lyra agreed, eyeing Grant suspiciously as he dropped his coat on a chair and tossed his plasma pistol onto the table with a loud clunk. "Humans are weird." Grant caught the whisper but didn't react. He poured himself a cup of synthetic tea, wincing at the bitter taste. "You'll get used to it," he grumbled, leaning against the counter. "Or you won't. Either way, you're here now." Xena climbed onto the old couch, sinking into the soft cushions with a content sigh. "It's soft," she chirped, rubbing her hands over the fabric. Lyra remained standing, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Why did you bring us here?" she demanded, glaring at Grant. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Would you prefer to stay out there in the cold, with bounty hunters breathing down your neck?" Lyra's jaw tightened. She hated feeling helpless, but she knew he was right. The galaxy wasn't safe for Calathon children, not after what happened to their planet. "We can take care of ourselves," she muttered. "Sure you can," Grant replied flatly, taking a long sip of his tea, "because starving and freezing is a great survival strategy." Xena giggled, but Lyra shot her a sharp look, silencing her immediately. Grant sighed and placed his cup down. He wasn't the nurturing type, but even he could see these girls had been through enough. "Look, kid, you don't trust me. Fine. I get it. I wouldn't trust me either. But you'll be safer here until I figure out what to do with you." Lyra narrowed her eyes. "And what are you going to do with us?" Grant shrugged. "Haven't decided yet." That didn't exactly comfort Lyra. But Xena seemed satisfied, happily exploring the strange gadgets on the table. Her glowing fingers hovered over an old mechanical device before Grant gently pushed her hand away. "Careful, kid. That's older than you." "What is it?" Xena asked, tilting her head. Grant chuckled, holding up the device. "A radio. An antique from Earth." Xena's face twisted in confusion. "A radio. What does it do?" "It plays music." The little alien's eyes widened. "Music. Can we hear it?" Grant twisted the dial, but the radio only sputtered static. "Hasn't worked in years." He gave it a light tap, but the noise persisted. "Like most things around here," he muttered under his breath. Xena frowned and gently placed her hand on the radio. Her skin faintly glowed, and to Grant's surprise, the static cleared for a brief second. A soft, crackling melody filled the room before fading out again. Grant stared at her hand. What was that? Zena pulled her hand back quickly. I didn't mean to. It just happens sometimes. Lara stepped between them, defensive as always. We can manipulate energy fields. It's a Calithan trait. Grant rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Useful trick. It's why people like you hunt us. Lara snapped. Grant's eyes hardened. I'm not a hunter. Silence stretched between them for a moment. Zena, sensing the tension, tried to change the subject. Can I fix something else? She asked, pointing at the coffee machine. Grant smirked. You can try, but that thing's been dead longer than you've been alive. Zena eagerly approached the machine, glowing fingers tracing over the wires. Lara watched closely, ready to step in if needed. A faint hum filled the room, followed by a pop and a small spark. Zena yelped and jumped back, while Grant quickly yanked the machine's plug. All right. Enough of that. I'm sorry. Zena gasped, looking up nervously. Grant let out a deep chuckle. Relax. I was getting tired of drinking that sludge anyway. Lyra's defensive stance softened slightly. Maybe this grumpy human wasn't as bad as she thought. As the night grew quieter, Zena drifted to sleep on the couch, curled up under an old blanket Grant tossed over her. Lara remained awake, sitting stiffly nearby. You don't sleep? Grant asked, sitting across from her. Not when I don't feel safe. Grant nodded, respecting the honesty. Suit yourself. He leaned back, staring out the station window at the distant stars. You two must have been through a lot, he said quietly. The Calithan War wasn't kind to anyone. Lara didn't answer. Her silence said enough. Grant glanced at the sleeping Zena. She's lucky to have you watching over her. She's all I have left, Lara whispered. Grant looked at the two sisters for a long time. He saw pieces of his old life reflected in them. Loss, survival, and the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. But deep down, he also knew this wasn't over. The galaxy rarely let anyone live in peace for long, and as if on cue, the station alarm blared to life. Grant stood, grabbing his plasma pistol. Lara's eyes widened. What is it? She asked. Grant narrowed his gaze at the blinking monitor. Trouble, he growled. The hunter's threat. The alarm blared through the station, its sharp tone cutting through the stillness like a blade. Grant's hand instinctively went to his plasma pistol resting on the counter, his eyes narrowing at the flashing red signal on the console. Lara jumped to her feet, standing protectively in front of her younger sister, Zena, who stirred but didn't wake. What is it? Lara's voice was tense, and Grant didn't miss the flicker of fear in her golden eyes. Unidentified ship approaching, Grant replied, his voice low but calm. He tapped the screen, bringing up the blurry image of a sleek, black vessel. His lips pressed into a thin line. He recognized the design instantly. Bounty hunters. Friends of yours? He asked, side-eyeing Lara. She stiffened. We didn't ask to be hunted. Didn't think you did, Grant muttered. But somebody sure wants you too bad enough to send that thing after you. Lara clenched her fists, the glow beneath her skin faintly pulsing. Grant watched her carefully. She was trying to stay strong, but he could tell she was barely holding it together. Grant sighed. All right, calm down. No one's taking you, not while you're here. Lara's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Why do you care? You barely know us. Grant's gaze softened for just a moment. Let's just say I know what it's like to lose family. He turned back to the console, watching as the bounty hunter ship slowed to a stop outside the station's docking perimeter. Zena, Grant called out gently, nudging the sleeping girl's shoulder. She blinked awake, rubbing her eyes. Stay with your sister. Don't leave this room until I say so. Zena sat up, yawning. What's happening? Nothing you need to worry about, Grant replied with a forced smile. Just some unwanted guests. Lara gritted her teeth. They won't stop until they have us. Yeah, Grant agreed. I figured. But that doesn't mean I'll make it easy for them. Without another word, he grabbed his coat and pistol, heading toward the airlock. As he passed Lyra, he glanced at her sternly. "Lock the door behind me. No matter what you hear, don't open it." Lyra hesitated but nodded. "Be careful." Grant smirked. "Careful's not really my style." The cold metal of the station's outer corridor felt even more suffocating as Grant approached the docking bay. Through the narrow observation window, he watched the bounty hunter ship hover ominously outside, its guns inactive, but definitely not for show. A soft hiss escaped the comms panel as a distorted voice crackled through. "Station Control, this is Captain Malk of the Black Harbinger. We're tracking fugitives believed to be on your station. Hand them over, and we won't cause trouble." Grant leaned against the console, pressing the comms button. "No fugitives here, Malk. Just me, and I don't like uninvited guests." There was a brief pause, then the voice returned, cold and professional. "Don't lie to me, Wilder. We detected Calithan energy signatures from your sector. We know they're there." Grant rolled his eyes. "You know how these old stations are. Power leaks all over the place. Maybe you're picking up radiation. Happens all the time." Another silence followed, but this one felt heavier. Grant could almost hear Malk's frustration building. "You're testing my patience," the bounty hunter growled. Grant smirked. "Oh, I'm counting on it." With a flick of a switch, Grant activated the station's magnetic shields, cutting off all docking access. The Black Harbinger shifted in place, its engines humming louder as the ship adjusted its position. "You just made a mistake, Wilder," Malk warned. "You have 1 hour. After that, we force our way in." Grant shut off the comms, sighing as he leaned back against the wall. "Why does everything have to be complicated?" he muttered. Back in the living quarters, Lyra paced nervously while Xana sat cross-legged on the couch, fiddling with a small energy crystal she pulled from her pocket. "They're not leaving, are they?" Xana asked quietly. Lyra shook her head. "No, they won't stop until they have us." Xana's gaze dropped to the floor. "What if we just left? Maybe Grant doesn't have to get involved." Lyra knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We've run enough. We can't keep running forever." The soft creak of the door made them both tense, but Grant soon stepped inside, tossing his coat onto the table. "Well, that could have gone better," he grumbled. "They're still out there?" Lyra asked. Grant nodded. "Yeah. They gave me an hour to think it over." Xena frowned. "And then what?" Grant glanced at his pistol, checking the energy level. "Then they get stupid." The room fell quiet. "Maybe we should leave," Lyra suggested reluctantly. "We can find somewhere else to hide." Grant crossed his arms. "And go where? You think they won't track you again?" He leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. "Look, kid, I don't know what you did to get a price on your heads, but you're not leaving this station. I didn't save you just to hand you over now." Lyra's eyes met his, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of trust. Grant smirked. "Besides, I've faced worse than a bunch of bounty hunters." Xena brightened slightly. "Really? What's worse than them?" Grant chuckled. "Married life." Lyra shook her head, but a faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Despite the looming danger outside, the small, grumpy human made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. A human's cleverness. The hour passed too quickly. Grant Wilder stood by the station's observation window, arms crossed, watching as the Black Harbinger circled just outside the perimeter. Its black hull glistened under the station lights, sleek and menacing. A ship like that wasn't just for show. It was built to break things, including stubborn humans who didn't know when to quit. Inside the station's living quarters, Lyra paced back and forth, her steps light but quick. Xena sat quietly on the couch, her eyes flicking between her sister and the locked door. Every few minutes, she glanced at the rusted clock mounted to the wall, as if she expected the bounty hunters to come crashing in any second. "Why isn't he doing something?" Lara whispered sharply, breaking the tense silence. He's just standing there. Xena peeked through the crack in the door at Grant's calm figure. Maybe he has a plan, she said, though the uncertainty in her voice was hard to miss. Lara scoffed. He better. Grant finally turned away from the window, stretching his arms casually, as if he weren't under the threat of imminent attack. He walked back to the girls, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Well, he began, his tone light, they'll try to board the station soon. So we should probably make sure that doesn't happen. Lara's eyes narrowed. You're acting like this is some kind of game. Grant shrugged. It kind of is. They're trying to outsmart me. I just need to make sure I'm smarter. Lara crossed her arms, clearly unimpressed. What exactly is your plan? Grant grinned. Ever heard of misdirection? Xena tilted her head. Misdirection. Grant grabbed a small remote device from the table, flipping it over in his hands. People like Mock think brute force solves everything. They see a locked door, they blow it open. But I know this station better than anyone. He tossed the remote to Xena, who barely caught it. You two are going to help me. Xena blinked. Me. Lara stepped forward protectively. Hold on, she's just a kid. You can't expect her to. Grant raised a hand, cutting her off. Relax. It's nothing dangerous. I just need her energy manipulating trick. It might be the edge we need. Lara's skeptical gaze lingered, but eventually she sighed and nodded. Grant knelt next to Xena, pointing at the console by the far wall. See that control panel? The station's got defense systems, but they're old and need power rerouting. Your abilities could juice them up temporarily. Xena's eyes lit up with excitement. I can do that. Grant chuckled. I figured. Lara, I need you to stay by the airlock. You'll let me know the second they try anything. Lara frowned. What if they blow the door open? They won't get that far, Grant replied confidently. She didn't look convinced, but went to her position nonetheless. 20 minutes later, the station's lights flickered as Xena worked on the defense systems. Her small hands hovered over the wires, glowing faintly as she concentrated. Sparks occasionally popped from the console, but Grant stayed calm, guiding her with simple instructions. You're doing great, kid, he said, watching as one of the turrets powered up. Its barrel rotated slowly, locking onto the Black Harbinger. Through the observation window, Grant spotted movement. The hunters were deploying a boarding pod, sleek and armored, designed to latch onto the station and drill through the airlock. Here we go, Grant muttered, gripping his plasma pistol. Lara's voice crackled through the comms. They're attaching something to the airlock. It looks like a breacher. Grant smirked. Good. Let them. Lara's eyes narrowed through the camera feed. How is that good? Because they're walking into a trap. Xena giggled from the console. I like traps. Grant gave her a thumbs up. Smart kid. The boarding pod finally connected, sealing itself against the station's exterior. A loud metallic clunk echoed through the corridor as the drill activated, slowly cutting through the airlock's thick plating. Lara tensed, standing guard near the door with a wrench she found lying around. Grant tapped his earpiece. Remember, stay hidden. If this goes sideways, you two take the emergency escape shuttle and get out of here. Xena frowned. But what about you? Grant winked. I'll catch up. The drill stopped. Silence hung in the air like a heavy fog. Then, boom! A shockwave rattled the station, followed by the agonized cries of men caught off guard. Smoke poured through the breached airlock, and a moment later, the clank of boots echoed inside the station as Mock's crew advanced. Lara flinched, gripping the wrench tighter. They're inside. Grant stayed calm. He pressed a button on his wrist device, activating one of the station's old turret systems. A loud mechanical whir filled the corridor as the turret swiveled toward the intruders. Mock's distorted voice echoed over the comms. You're testing my patience, Wilder. Grant smirked. I know. The turret fired, sending a burst of energy blasts down the hall. The bounty hunters scrambled for cover as sparks rained from the walls. Grant didn't let up. Xena hit the secondary circuit. Xena's hands glowed as she transferred energy into the station's failing power grid. The second turret hummed to life, locking onto Mock's crew. Lyra watched from her corner, amazed. The bounty hunters were pinned, unable to advance. Grant leaned back in his chair, arms behind his head. See. Misdirection. While they're busy dodging turrets, I'll seal the airlock behind them. With a press of another button, the airlock doors slammed shut, trapping Malk and his crew inside the docking bay. Malk's angry voice filled the comms. You can't keep us locked in here forever. Grant chuckled. No, but I can keep you locked long enough to eject the bay. Malk's voice faltered. Wait, you wouldn't. Grant's finger hovered over the eject button. Try me. Xena giggled, and Lyra smirked for the first time. You're crazy, Malk muttered. Grant grinned. I know. The secret in the data crystal. The bounty hunter ship, Black Harbinger, drifted just outside Grant Wilder's station, battered and humiliated. Inside the docking bay, Malk and his crew remained trapped behind reinforced airlock doors, sealed so tight that even their advanced breacher tools had failed to make progress. Grant leaned against the console, sipping lukewarm synthetic tea, watching the feed from the security cameras. Malk paced angrily behind the glass, his glare sharp enough to cut steel. You know, Grant mused into the comms, I could let you out. But where's the fun in that? Malk's voice crackled back, laced with venom. You're playing a dangerous game, Wilder. Sooner or later, someone's going to pay more for your head than theirs. Grant chuckled. I'm not worried. You hunters never learn. It's not about who pays more. It's about who's got the better cards. And right now, I'm holding all of them. He cut the channel before Malk could respond. In the corner of the room, Xena sat cross-legged on the floor, gently cradling a glowing crystal about the size of her palm. The soft blue light pulsed faintly, casting shimmering patterns across the walls. Lyra sat beside her, silently watching over her shoulder. Grant glanced at them. That the thing they're after? Lyra stiffened slightly. It's not a thing. It's the last connection we have to our parents. Grant's expression softened, didn't mean to offend. But that crystal's got to be important if someone like Malk's willing to risk his hide for it. Xena looked up, her golden eyes filled with curiosity. We don't know why they want it so badly. Our parents said it was important, but they didn't explain everything. Lyra tightened her grip on the crystal. They told us to protect it, no matter what. Grant walked over and crouched beside them, carefully inspecting the crystal without touching it. Its glow felt strange, ancient, almost like it held something alive inside. Well, Grant said, if we don't know what we're dealing with, I guess it's time we find out. Xena's face brightened. You can unlock it. Grant scratched his beard. I can try. But if this thing's tied to Calithan tech, it might not be that simple. He motioned for them to follow him into his workshop. The room was cluttered, filled with spare parts, half-built devices, and more broken gadgets than functional ones. In the center sat an old diagnostic scanner, something Grant salvaged years ago from a derelict cruiser. Put it here, Grant said, gesturing to the scanning tray. Xena gently placed the crystal down. As the machine hummed to life, lines of code flashed across the screen, but most of it appeared scrambled, unreadable. Grant frowned. That's odd. Lyra leaned closer. What's wrong? Grant tapped a few keys, but the scanner failed to translate the data. This crystal isn't just storing information. It's encrypted in a way I haven't seen before. Xena bit her lip. Does that mean we can't open it? Grant grinned faintly. I didn't say that. He rummaged through a drawer, pulling out an old interface device, barely holding together with tape and loose wires. He plugged it into the scanner, rerouting the energy through Xena's power manipulation. The crystal pulsed brighter. The screen flickered, and then something unexpected happened. A holographic projection emerged from the crystal, filling the room with a faint blue light. It showed a map, vast and detailed, of distant star systems. At the center of the map was a blinking marker, highlighting an uncharted region of space. Xena gasped. That's not any place I recognize." Grant's eyes narrowed. "Because it's not on any standard charts. This is old. Pre-collapse era, maybe." Lara crossed her arms, frowning. "Why would our parents leave us a map like this?" Grant's gaze lingered on the projection. "Your parents were smart. They didn't just leave you a map. This isn't a treasure hunt. This is a sanctuary." Xena tilted her head. "A sanctuary." Grant zoomed in on the blinking marker. Calathans were hunted because of their ability to manipulate energy, right? A place like this could be one of the last safe havens for your people. Lyra's breath caught. "You really think so?" Grant nodded. "Yeah. And if this map's worth risking bounty hunters, then whatever's out there must be valuable. Maybe even powerful." Xena's eyes shimmered with hope. "We have to go there." Lyra hesitated. "Xena, we can't keep running forever." Xena interrupted, her voice firm despite her soft demeanor. "Maybe this place is where we can finally stop hiding." Grant watched the two sisters silently. He could see the flicker of hope in Xena's eyes and the uncertainty in Lyra's. Finally, Grant broke the silence with a sigh. "I'm getting too old for this." He cracked his knuckles. "Fine. We'll head for the coordinates, but don't expect this to be a joyride. If Malk and his crew figure out where you're headed, they'll be on our tail the whole way." Lyra crossed her arms. "We can handle it." Grant smirked. "Good, because I have a feeling things are about to get a whole lot more complicated." He shut down the hologram, grabbing his coat. "Get some rest. We leave first thing tomorrow." As Grant walked out of the workshop, Xena clutched the crystal tightly to her chest, a faint smile on her face. For the first time in months, she felt like they had a real chance. Lara, however, couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lay at the end of that map wasn't going to be as welcoming as they hoped. Battle at the sanctuary. The journey to the sanctuary was anything but quiet. Grant's station-bound freighter wasn't built for long-distance travel, but somehow the rusted ship groaned its way across uncharted space, led only by the blinking coordinates from the crystal. The deeper they traveled, the less familiar the star patterns became, as if they were slipping into a forgotten part of the galaxy. Lara sat in the co-pilot's seat, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the swirling starfield outside. Her mind raced with possibilities. The sanctuary could be a beacon of hope, or another trap. Either way, it was better than running endlessly. Xena, however, couldn't hide her excitement. She hovered near the console, pointing at the strange nebula formations and distant glowing planets. "I've never seen stars like this." Grant smirked, steering the freighter with one hand. "That's because most folks stay away from these regions. Too many ghost stories." Lyra's brow furrowed. "Ghost stories?" Grant shrugged. "Old tales. Ships disappearing without a trace. Some say whole fleets got swallowed up by black holes that weren't marked on charts. Others blame ancient alien tech. I always figured it was just nonsense to scare rookies." Xena's eyes sparkled. "What if the sanctuary is hidden because of that?" Grant tapped the side of the console, his expression thoughtful. "Could be. Some of the best hiding spots are in places people are too afraid to check." Lara shifted in her seat, uneasy. "Let's hope there's something left when we get there." The sanctuary appears. Hours later, as the ship drifted closer to the blinking marker on the map, a structure slowly emerged from the shadows of space. At first, it looked like a broken moon, jagged and fractured, hanging in the void. But as they approached, the cracks and crevices revealed massive metallic towers, half submerged beneath layers of stone and dust. Faint energy signatures pulsed from beneath the surface, like a sleeping giant stirring. "There it is," Grant said softly, eyes narrowing. That's no ordinary station. Xena leaned closer to the viewport, her face nearly pressed against the glass. It looks ancient. Lara wasn't as optimistic, or abandoned. Grant steered the freighter into a slow descent toward one of the docking platforms barely visible beneath layers of debris. Let's find out. The freighter touched down with a soft thud, engines hissing as they powered down. The descent into the sanctuary. The air inside the sanctuary was stale, cold, and heavy with dust. Grant led the way, plasma pistol drawn, as they stepped through the cracked entrance corridor. Dim lights flickered faintly along the walls, barely illuminating the strange markings carved into the metal. This place hasn't seen visitors in centuries, Grant muttered. Xena ran her fingers along the carvings, her energy faintly interacting with the symbols. They glowed brighter under her touch. I think it recognizes us. Lara glanced around, tense. Or it's waking up to warn someone we're here. Grant smirked. If someone's been sleeping here this long, I doubt they're in a welcoming mood. They continued deeper, following the crystal's glow as it pulsed like a compass, guiding them through winding corridors. Eventually, they reached a large chamber that opened into a breathtaking sight. In the center of the room stood a massive obelisk, covered in glowing calathon symbols. Surrounding it were smaller pods, shaped like cocoons, lined in neat rows across the chamber floor. Energy pulsed faintly from within the pods. Xena's eyes widened. It's not abandoned. They're sleeping. Grant approached one of the pods cautiously, tapping lightly against the glass. A faint blue form shifted inside, too obscured to make out. Cryosleep, he said, nodding in understanding. Your people hid here, waiting for the right time to wake up. Lyra's heart raced. We found them. But as the words left her mouth, the chamber suddenly trembled. Grant's eyes darted toward the entrance as distant metallic footsteps echoed through the hallways. We're not alone, he muttered, tightening his grip on his pistol. The attack begins. Before they could react, the sound of blaster fire erupted from the far corridor. Sparks flew as bolts ricocheted off the walls. Grant shoved Xena behind a large stone pillar. Stay down. Lara crouched beside her, pulling Xena close. How did they find us? Grant peeked around the corner, spotting the familiar armored figures of Malk's bounty hunters flooding into the chamber. Malk himself led the charge, his rifle raised. You really thought you could hide from me? Malk sneered. I told you this wasn't over, Wilder. Grant cursed under his breath. Persistent bastard. Malk gestured to his men. Grab the girls. Leave the human. Lyra's skin began to glow faintly, her energy reacting to the danger. They're not taking us. Grant glanced at her. Good, because I'm not planning on letting them. He pressed a button on his wrist device, and suddenly the sanctuary's lights flickered violently. The obelisk hummed louder, reacting to the presence of intruders. Xena gasped. The sanctuary is waking up. Malk frowned as the floor beneath his feet rumbled. What the hell is happening? Grant smirked. You just triggered something ancient, friend. I wouldn't stick around if I were you. Suddenly, the cocoons around the chamber began to crack, and faint figures emerged, calathons, stirring from their long sleep. Xena's voice trembled with excitement. They're waking up. Our people. Lara stepped forward, her eyes burning with determination. You came after us because you thought we were weak, she said, her voice echoing in the chamber. But you just woke up an entire sanctuary. Grant chuckled. Bad luck for you, Malk. As the calathons rose from their pods, glowing with ancient power, Malk's confident expression finally cracked. Fall back. Malk barked, but it was too late. Grant smiled, holstering his pistol as the calathons advanced. Guess that's checkmate. A new family. The bounty hunters fled in chaos, their retreat echoing through the ancient sanctuary. The calathons who had emerged from their pods watched in silence, their glowing eyes tracking the invaders until the last of them disappeared into the shadows of the corridor. Grant holstered his plasma pistol with a satisfied smirk. leaning against one of the large stone pillars. "Well, that was fun," he muttered, rubbing his shoulder. "Haven't had a fight like that in years." Xena clung to Lyra's arm, wide-eyed and trembling slightly. "They're gone, right?" Lyra nodded, brushing a lock of hair behind Xena's ear. "For now." One of the newly awakened Calathans, an elder by the looks of his silver-streaked skin and deep-set eyes, approached the sisters with slow, deliberate steps. His gaze lingered on the glowing crystal in Xena's hand. "You carry the heart of Calath," the elder said, his voice smooth and calm. "How did you come to possess it?" Xena looked nervously at Lyra, who stepped forward. "Our parents gave it to us," she replied firmly. "They told us to protect it, no matter what." The elder's eyes softened. "Your parents, were they Darian and Sela?" Xena's eyes lit up. "You knew them?" The elder smiled faintly. "Yes, they were among those who sealed this sanctuary long ago. They stayed behind to ensure no one would follow." His gaze darkened. It seems their fears were not unfounded. Grant crossed his arms. "I hate to break up this reunion, but I'm guessing this place isn't going to stay hidden for long now that Malk's crew knows about it." The elder turned to him, regarding Grant curiously. "You are human," he observed. "Yet you fought to protect the children of Calath." Grant shrugged. "Didn't seem right to leave them behind." The elder gave a small nod of respect. "Few humans would show such compassion for our kind." Lyra glanced at Grant. "He pretends to be grumpy, but he's not as heartless as he looks." Grant shot her a sideways glare. "Don't spread lies, kid. I've got a reputation to maintain." Xena giggled, and for the first time since their journey began, the tension seemed to lift. Restoring the sanctuary. Over the following days, the Calathans worked to fully restore the sanctuary. Xena eagerly helped, using her energy manipulation abilities to power ancient systems, while Lyra patrolled the perimeter, ever vigilant. Grant, on the other hand, found himself stuck with maintenance work. Despite his grumbling, he quietly enjoyed the change of pace. "You know," Grant said one evening, leaning against a railing as he watched Xena and the Calathan children play near the obelisk, "I never thought I'd end up babysitting aliens in the middle of nowhere." Lyra joined him, arms crossed as she looked down at the scene. "She's happy here," she said softly. "For the first time in months, I feel like she can finally be a kid again." Grant's eyes softened, though he quickly masked it with his usual gruff exterior. "Good. She deserves it." Lyra glanced at him curiously. "Why did you help us?" "Really?" Grant was quiet for a moment, watching Xena laugh and chase one of the Calathan children around the chamber. "I lost my family a long time ago," he admitted. "War took everything I had. After that, I guess I stopped caring about anything else." Lyra's expression softened. "But when I found you two out there," Grant continued, "I remembered what it felt like. Having someone to protect. Feels good to have that again, even if you two drive me insane." Lyra smirked. "We'll take that as a compliment. A fateful decision." One evening, as the sanctuary lights dimmed, the elder Calathan approached Grant at the edge of the platform overlooking the galaxy. "You have done much for us, Captain Wilder," the elder said. "But I sense you are not one to remain in one place for long." Grant glanced at the stars. "Never been much of a settler. Always moving, even if I don't know where I'm going." The elder nodded. "Yet you've found something here. Family." Grant's grip tightened around the railing. "Yeah, guess I have." The elder smiled gently. "Lyra and Xena trust you. They see you as more than a protector. Perhaps it is time you stop running from what you've lost." Grant let out a deep breath. "Maybe you're right. A new beginning." The day of departure arrived sooner than expected. Grant packed the few belongings he had brought, securing them in the cargo hold of his freighter. Xena watched him from the entrance, her eyes filled with sadness. "You're leaving?" she asked quietly. Grant knelt down, ruffling her hair. "I've got some things to take care of, but I'll be back." Xena bit her lip. Promise. Grant smiled. Promise. Lara stood nearby, arms crossed. You'd better keep that promise. Grant smirked. I'm not planning on breaking it. As he boarded the ship, Shinna ran up and hugged him tightly. You're part of our family now, she said softly. Grant's heart swelled, but he hid it behind a gruff laugh. Yeah, don't get too sentimental on me. The freighter's engines roared to life, and as Grant lifted off, he watched the sanctuary shrink in the distance, its lights glowing faintly beneath the stars. For the first time in years, Grant felt something new, hope. And as he soared through the endless expanse of space, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't running anymore.